Welcome to KRQE's New Mexico News Insiders, 2025 Regional Edward R. Murrow Award winner for Best Podcast. Here's Gabrielle Burkhart and Chris McKee. Sponsored by New Mexico PBS.
In the interest of asking you questions that throw you off guard, I wanted to ask you a callback question here, something to start with, going back to an episode we did at the end of last year, an episode of Insiders, so about 9 months ago, right? It ties in, I think, really to what we're talking about here today. It was a year-end episode.
Yeah.
We each brought a topic in. I brought a topic.
I remember this because we each brought topics in and you chose like economic development, which I think is kind of just, I don't know, I might have made fun of you for it, but
probably.
Yeah.
It's not nice, but it's okay. No.
It's a very,
it's fine.
It's a deep dive topic and there's a lot to talk about.
And it's a hard one to bring up, I think, in that kind of format where a lot of times we're talking about the topical things of the year, right? I talked about that as as development and future growth in New Mexico. And I think that, again, ties in here to today's episode because everyone wants to see business investing in New Mexico. There certainly have been ups and downs for things like solar, wind, fusion energy, to computer chip makers, film studios, space companies, and a lot more. And so the question, I think, is how those companies come to invest in New Mexico. How does that happen? What happens behind the scenes? And we know that usually there's a lot of players.
Yeah, one of those players at the state level is New Mexico's Economic Development Department. And we're joined today by the leader of that department, Secretary Rob Black. Secretary Black, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you again being here. You've led this department for nearly a year now, appointed to the position, as I understand, last September. Prior to this, it sounds like you were the president CEO of the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce. How did you get to this role that you're at here now? What is it about business development or economic development that really drives you, that interests you?
Well, that can be a very long answer or a short one on how I got here, because I am a kid from New Mexico. I grew up in Lovington. And what drives me in this role is a real passion to see our state thrive. Having grown up in a rural community in the Southeast, I watched as my peers started to mature, and it was the oil patch or it was get out, and there wasn't a lot of other opportunities. And what we started to hear this narrative right over the last several decades is our number one export as New Mexico is our kids. And that to me really hurt. And so I wanted this to me is an opportunity to really shift that narrative, to make this the place that our kids want to be, where our kids can thrive, our families can thrive, and our businesses can thrive. And so I really see what I'm doing is trying to create that dynamic. And I've got an amazing team that we're working with at EDD to help us do that.
Yeah. High level, without getting into the particular ins and outs of the work you do just yet, what is the role of the state economic development department, and how does that work differentiate, you say, from local development in various cities?
So in some ways, I walk around with pom-poms. I'm a cheerleader for the state. I also walk around with fire extinguishers because I'm trying to put out fires where, there's potential conflict or challenges. But our goal is to really help tell the story of why New Mexico has unique opportunities for business growth and development. To then also work with our policymakers and our appropriators to make sure we're placing investments in ways that can help spur that growth where we have unique competitive opportunities. And then it's working with those companies to help them find a location, to find an opportunity where they can grow, hire New Mexicans, create prosperity in our communities, and be successful as businesses. So it's a kind of all of those things, and we do that in a variety of different ways at the department.
You mentioned going back to your upbringing, and it was either the oil patch or get out. Do you feel like New Mexico's gotten away from that vibe, that feeling that you had so many years ago?
Not as much as I would like. I do think, and you can still see it if you look at population rates in our rural counties, they're continuing to diminish in many of them. So I think where they aren't is in the oil patch. ironically. So Lee and Eddy County have seen great population growth over the last decade or more, but other counties have seen that loss. So I think there's a lot to be done to make sure that we're creating those opportunities for our kids. We have seen some upticks, both in job creation as well as some bright spots. Los Lunas is one of those bright spots. They've seen 20% population growth in the last 9 years. So there's places where we've done it well, and I think we can tell those stories. And the better we tell those stories, the better it is that we can replicate those things.
Before we get to the next question, you mentioned Los Lunas. Is there something you can point to attribute that growth to in just that city?
Yeah, I absolutely. So if you think about in 2015, we started construction on the Meta data center. So in 2015, if you look at the baseline GRT in that community, and you look at how it's improved over the last 9 years, $1/3 billion new tax revenue in that community alone, 20% population growth. And I think you can tie that to the type of investment that Meta has made with the data center. And then you pile on the solar farms, the transmission lines, the wind farms, and all of the energy aspects and water aspects that tie into that development. And do we think that Amazon puts their distribution center in Los Lunas if Meta's not there first? Probably not. So then you start to get that compounding, and you get new restaurants, new vendors, new housing development, and that just adds to the growth. I think that was a catalyst that helped drive. And then you've had great leadership in Los Lunas. I mean, the mayor, the city council, the economic development team, that locally, they've done really hard work, and it's paying off.
Yeah. I do think when we talk about the concept of economic development, it is a core part of the reporting that we do at a news station, because it really is an exciting thing when you're able to tell people, new businesses coming, new jobs coming, new quality of life investments in our city. And I think this question speaks a little bit to, where your answer was going as well in this last question when you were talking about Los Lunas. But more broadly about New Mexico, how do you qualify where New Mexico is at in terms of companies investing here at this point? Are we in a good place?
I think we're in a uniquely positive and good place. I think we're at a pivot point and have started that pivot. And there's a variety of reasons why I think that's happening, and we can talk a little bit about that today. But I'm seeing a level of deal flow of companies who are interested in New Mexico that I think is unprecedented. And in part, it's because our strategy has really leaned in on areas of opportunity, areas where we have a unique competitive advantage. And the state, the legislature, the governor have leaned in on saying, we're going to make bets in these spaces. We're going to invest because we think we can be uniquely competitive there. And we had an announcement yesterday around one of those concepts with quantum computing. And I didn't know 3 years ago what quantum computing was. I had guys at UNM telling me we should be paying attention to this. And this is when I was at the chamber. I was just like, what you're talking about sounds like science fiction to me. I didn't know that UNM has the best quantum computing PhD program in the world, because of the ties it has with Sandia National Labs, which has the first quantum computer. And so when you look at quantum C-suite companies, the C-suites of companies all around the world, almost every one of them has a UNM PhD in those. And so, again, we invented quantum computing in New Mexico. We invented fission, fusion, and fracking in New Mexico. We lead on those sort of R&D technology work. Number one state in the country in public R&D spend. Number one state in the country, percentage of PhDs. We kind of miss that narrative, but when I go and tell that story around the world or around the country, people are like, we should be thinking about New Mexico. And I think they are starting to think about New Mexico. They're finding out we are a state And they're a state, and we're a state that they should be investing in.
Yeah, we're not a part of Mexico. Mind blowing to see some of those on social media.
Still
and you
happens,
mentioned the narrative. We've done a lot of education focused episodes recently, and part of the narrative is that we're low in national rankings. But you mentioned the highest amount of PhDs. That's certainly not in the narrative that we frequently hear. But let's talk some specifics. I understand there are some specific programs and methods that you have. Can you give us an example of some specific work that you do to attract economic development?
Sure. So we have a variety of programs that have been established by the legislature over the last 15, 20 years, and some even longer. I'll start with JTIP, which is our Job Training Incentive Program. It was started in 1972, and it's one of the most respected nationally. And basically what we do is when a company comes to New Mexico and they're doing manufacturing, they're doing things that are creating what we call economic-based jobs, so jobs that bring revenue into the state or into a region. We will subsidize the training for those up to 6 months for those employees, and it could be up to 70, 80% of their salary. So especially if they're in a rural community. So that's a really rich incentive for them. So we'll help pay for salaries. We have a high wage jobs tax credit. So if you're going to pay people more, we're going to incentivize you more because we want those jobs here in New Mexico. We also have what's called our Local Economic Development Act program, LEDA. And that fund helps pay for physical construction, like building a building. It'll also pay for rent. So we kind of use it as our closing fund. So it's like, here's our sweetener on the deal to really get you to move to New Mexico. And then we also use industrial revenue bonds. We use a variety of an R&D tax credit. We have a variety of packages and incentives that make New Mexico really attractive.
If we can talk a little bit more about some of the industries, I think now some of them have come to roost here in New Mexico, really. Aerospace is one of them, right? New Mexico is obviously a really big investment in the desert. There's the $250 million Spaceport America that was built out over a certain number of years. I'm thinking it was at least like a 5 to 6 year construction build out there. Something that started under Governor Bill Richardson, really with the idea of having Virgin Galactic as its primary tenant. NMSU, their Arrowhead Center, they recently published a big economic study suggesting they found as of 2024, the spaceport has contributed about $240 million in total economic output last year, as I understand it. Virgin Galactic is obviously a large anchor tenant, as I mentioned, but we also know they've sort of dialed back operations for space tourism with an intent to ramp up again by next summer, 2026. So that facility, I think, though, has long kind of posed the question, what is happening at the spaceport, and is there anything happening there aside from the ebbs and flows of Virgin Galactic's business? How do you respond to that? What's going on at the spaceport?
So there's a lot going on out at Spaceport, and it is a core asset for us on the kind of space and defense sectors. Again, we're uniquely competitive because of the history of Sandia, Lanel, Kirtland. Those create an opportunity for us to be really competitive. So we see a lot of test flights that kind of go under the radar that take place out there. There was a journal article on Friday about a company hypersonic missile company looking to locate here in New Mexico. They've done test flights out at Spaceport. A variety of other hypersonic companies have done test flights out there or test engines out there. So it's an opportunity for us to be the test place, but then with the idea that we create those long-term tenants as well. We're just now getting into where we're able to do vertical launches. Virgin does horizontal launch. We're building out the capacity to do vertical launches and retrievals. And so that we're going through that permit process right now. What that starts to do is this is something that blew my mind. There's actually companies that do manufacturing in space. In particular, you think about cancer drugs. So when you shoot cancer drugs, or when you make cancer drugs, especially those that you have to do long-term treatments, you go in and it's 8 hours of sitting with an IV. The reason that is the size of the cell for the drug is so big, it takes a really big needle and it's slow to get through your system. if you manufacture it in a zero gravity environment, the chemicals set differently and the molecules set differently, so it can be much smaller and efficient. So instead of waiting 8 hours to get your cancer treatment, your chemo treatment, you can get it with a shot. But you have to retrieve that from space. And so we're creating the opportunity to do that sort of space manufacturing here in New Mexico.
That's really incredible. It reminds me of the Space Force episode. There's so much innovation that we don't often hear about in New Mexico. Really interesting. Is the Space Force viable, though, without an anchor tenant like Virgin Galactic? Where does it go without Virgin, potentially, if they don't hold up their end of the deal?
Well, we continue to be very engaged with Virgin. We have every reason to believe, and they're in the process of building out 2 new spaceships that are larger so that they can seat more people and kind of improve their return on their investment and revenue streams. So we do expect they'll have both of those spaceships flying next year. So that we're excited about that. But again, we're from a variety of different companies. We just signed a lease with a new Japanese-based company that will be doing, again, vertical launches. We're in talks with a variety of folks who have Department of Defense contracts, but want to be in front of the fence, not behind the fence. And having places like Spaceport to test their facilities, to build their facilities that have the proximity to White Sands, but are also they can have civilian workforce that doesn't have to go behind a fence. It creates a very unique opportunity. We also see in New Mexico, and this ties into the role of the spaceport. New Mexico Tech is a leader in the world on drone technology. Tech doing a lot of work there, but then also New Mexico State with their physical science lab. They do a lot of work with our defense partners, our government partners, and they have a fly zone that covers most of southwest New Mexico, but includes Spaceport, where they can do unmanned drone flights under FAA rules. That is one of the largest places to do that in the country. So again, unique competitive advantage. The physical science lab at New Mexico State's been operating since the V2 rocket days, but it's been totally under the radar. But it's an opportunity for us, again, to lead. They're on kind of electronic warfare, on drones, on radio frequency jamming, and beating radio frequency jamming. New Mexico State's a leader in the world. Who knew, right? But I think those are the types of competitive advantages that we should be leaning into as a state, because it uniquely positions our kids for really exciting future.
So you don't see Virgin Galactic going away anytime soon? I
don't. We're they're continuing to do activities out there. We see them, and we're in continuing discussions with them about expanding their facilities and looking at updating their lease so that they can do so, because they're going to need more capacity with the coming with 2 spaceships instead of just 1.
We'll be right back with more of the New Mexico News Insiders.
Hi, I'm Logan Rader, host of New Mexico Living. New Mexico News Insiders is sponsored by New Mexico PBS.
If you like New Mexico News Insiders, learn more about New Mexico in Focus, a weekly hour-long show analyzing decisions impacting New Mexico statewide. Stream it anytime, anywhere. Visit nmpbs.org and follow them on all social media platforms.
Now back to New Mexico News Insiders.
Another industry EDD has targeted is energy beyond their traditional oil and gas, is wind, solar, and now even fusion energy. And I think there's a few different stories here. Let's start with what's seemingly a success story. Arcosa Wind Towers near Belen, which is making turbines and has fueled at least 250 jobs. President Biden visited that company a few years back. Did EDD play a role there, and where do you go from that investment?
Absolutely. So we've a variety of different incentives we're supporting Arcosa, from LEDA to our job training programs, et cetera. And we've continued to expand that and helping them build out entry roads with, again, additional LEDA grants to support expansion. And if, when you do go to Los Lunas and you're looking at the I-25 road, you just see those towers flowing up to the wind farms. And it's really exciting that we're building that advanced energy future from the ground up here in New Mexico.
Yeah. Is there anything more to look out for that company on the horizon here? Or like what you see with the Facebook data center, is there a chance that becomes a cornerstone for other people trying to co-locate, other wind elements or wind energy companies there?
Well, I love that you talked about co-locate, because that's very much about how I think about economic development. Is you want to have those main companies, but who are their suppliers, and who are their customers, and how can we make it attractive for that whole ecosystem? And then who are folks who play in the same space that share a workforce? Because one of the things, in order to really we've had a hard time, making the R&D that we spin out sticky in New Mexico. Part of the way you make it sticky is you get enough workforce that, my job or my boss is kind of lousy at my work. I want to go to another business that does the same sort of work. But if there's only one in the state, it's hard, and you may not want to go there because of that risk. But if you've got 3 or 4 places that share the same sort of workforce, so if you start thinking about fusion, if you start thinking about quantum computing, fission, like Kairos Power, who's does their R&D and manufacturing of small modular reactors here in the state, you start to see that sharing of workforce, and then you share it with Sandia and Lanel. Now you're building an ecosystem, and you're building it from what CNM is doing with starting this fall with the quantum boot camp. So they're going to start at a basic level 2-year program, quantum boot camping for that technology. But then you've also go all the way up to that PhD level. So you're building that full workforce. And advanced welding, huge part of what Arcosa is doing, huge part of what Lanel does. They have really advanced, and they have some great training programs that they've built out at Luna, at Navajo Tech around welding, at San Juan College. So we're building those technicians who are doing that really important work. But it's building that broader workforce that makes it easier to make those jobs sticky in New Mexico.
Yeah. I want to stick with energy, but a different realm of that. It's solar. There is a situation here in New Mexico that kind of has left me wondering, what is going on here? A few years back, a couple companies, including Maxion and then Ebon Solar, they decided they were going to build dueling manufacturing plants for solar panels in Albuquerque and Mesa del Sol. But so far, we haven't seen either company really come through with what they've said they were hoping to do. And just basically, why is that? We see these really big job announcements with all the key players. The CEOs of these companies come out. Oftentimes the governor is there along with a lot of other dignitaries. But then, why didn't it come through on the timeline that was sort of initially outlined? And I don't know if there's anything particular you can share about those companies there, but I think more broadly, people wonder, is this a company issue or is it a New Mexico issue? Did we do something wrong?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's those two in particular. One is, New Mexico's was leaning in on advanced energy. We wanted to really be the home for those sort of projects. And with the Biden administration's focus on, reshoring manufacturing, and in particular around renewable energy projects,
right,
that was a big part of that.
Yeah.
You might have noticed that's not the same priority for the current federal administration,
right?
As well as throwing in with some really challenging tariff situations. And, I'll just use one example. Even with our friends at Maxion, and this is public, so it's not something I'm talking out of school with, they have manufacturing in Mexico that they ran into some really, they couldn't get product into the U.S. They got stuck at the border. And it was several $100 million of product, which created and we tried to work with both the Biden administration and the Trump administration to clear that up so they could move the product, because there's a lot, I think 30 or 40 states had projects with their solar panels that they couldn't get into the U.S. That created a really severe cash crunch for them, which required them to get additional investors. Those investors tended to be Chinese investors. So it starts to create a different dynamic as far as it relates to what was an American company, but having different types of ownership structure. And it made it harder to move that through the process when you sit right next to Kirtland Air Force Base. So there's some unique challenges that some of these projects have, that it's not a New Mexico issue, but it's, we certainly work with our partner companies to try to help them find a pathway to success. But sometimes, there are kind of global politics or global or federal policies shifting that create it hard to deploy capital. And so people kind of step back and say, we're going to wait and see how this tariff thing is going to work out before we deploy those sort of resources.
Is it fair to say that the Maxion plans are kind of dead in the water at this point, or?
No, I mean, Maxion actually, they've leased a separate building out towards the Balloon Fiesta Park where they've already got that lease. They've been doing some remodeling there. So the hope is they'll start assembly in New Mexico at that facility and then continue to work toward a path. And same thing, I think, with Ebon, looking at some other locations that might be better fit for them where we could get to that manufacturing. But, that'll be for the company to, talk about kind of what their plans are. Our hope and continued goal would be to, again, find success for them here in New Mexico.
Yeah, even if it is on a smaller scale than what was originally perhaps announced. What do you tell the New Mexicans who maybe, they hear these stories and they feel a little deflated by the fact that things haven't worked out as originally promised or didn't live up to quite the big hype yet?
I think it's super fair for New Mexicans to be skeptical and frustrated. I get that way. And have. And so I think our job is to deliver for New Mexicans. Our job is to make sure that we're creating pathways to prosperity. And if we're not delivering that, you should hold us accountable. And so our goal is to, we have to do these announcements sometimes because a company is going to be going before a public body, so that name's going to be public. So we need to have a conversation around the company, and it may not be a done deal yet. We still may be in competition. And so I get that, sometimes if we don't win that competition, that people are like, well, you said they were going to come. So, well, we said we're trying. But our job is, not to be equated with Alec Baldwin's character in Glengarry Glen Ross, but we've always got to be closing, right? ABC.
Always be closing.
Always be closing. And so
great movie.
It is a great movie. I mean, the actors in that are crazy.
I digress, but yes, love that movie.
But, we do have to be closing. And so our job and my team's job is we believe 100% that we're there to make the lives of New Mexicans better, to create opportunities for better quality of life and prosperity. We do that by getting shovels in the dirt, by getting to the finish line on these projects. And so we are really committed to getting that done and making the types of investments that will drive that. And I think you saw that yesterday with the Quantum Innovation Hub announcement. That investment is bringing new quantum companies to New Mexico, new venture capital to New Mexico, and that project will be fully operational in months. So, I think it's those sort of investments that hopefully bring faith back to New Mexicans that we're here and trying to deliver those results.
Yeah, and again, this is Roadrunner Venture Studios, a $25 million investment, establish and operate a quantum venture studio, as the EDD has put out there in a news release here.
Yeah, and I think I'll share what's part of what's exciting to me, and I think it's a great best case scenario or structure about how to do this. It's grounded in the private sector, so it's a venture capital fund who's kind of hosting this. But QNMI, the Quantum New Mexico Institute out of UNM, will be setting up their offices in the studio. We're going to have, I think, 3 or 4 different private sector companies are part of the studio. Landel, Sandia, also part of the studio, and Elevate Quantum, which is the only federally recognized quantum hub between us and Colorado, shared quantum hub, will have offices there and investments in there too. So it's really this ecosystem we're building. And the super fun thing that I'll share with you today is that The other group that's going to be partnering with us on that is DARPA, which is the research arm for the military. And we're going to be announcing that DARPA will be setting up a 5-year partnership in New Mexico between the labs, UNM, and our research institutions to do quantum computer validation and testing. It's going to be a $60 million investment. DARPA is going to match, and we're going to be bringing in scientists, PhDs from all over the world to do this work, cementing New Mexico as the quantum state.
Wow. That's pretty exciting.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Very
All
cool.
right. Well, turning to another energy investment, there's another company that's eyeing Albuquerque called Pacific Fusion. They want to build a fusion energy research facility, potentially in Mesa del Sol. Why does a company like this pick New Mexico, and what would their arrival mean?
That's a great question. So why a company would pick New Mexico like Pacific Fusion? Because again, fusion technology on Earth was invented at Sandia National Labs. So the Z machine has been there for about 30 years or really more, but kind of the later iterations that was helping build out a lot of this technology. LANL, also a different type of fusion technology based on laser-based technologies, also has created a lot of fusion-based research and development and technology out of Sandia. So we have the R&D background, the PhDs. Again, many of the scientists who work in these elevated fusion companies either worked at Sandia or LANL. And they have New Mexico history. They're addicted to chili. They want to be back home, right? And so we're trying to make it easy for them to do that. And Pacific Fusion, so that's one of the main reasons. One is they want to be close to the labs because those are partners for them, both that are very, very important. There's also the workforce that is really rich here in that type of energy development. But also the people who built the Z Lab at Sandia, that company still operates and maintains it and improves it. They could help build these new fusion labs, right? Because how many places can you go and say, I've got experience building a fusion facility? It's basically New Mexico. There's a couple of places in England and Virginia that are starting that, but we've got companies that have already done it. And so, again, we're uniquely positioned. We need to be leaning in on that leadership.
We'll be right back with more on New Mexico News Insiders.
Hi, I'm Monica Wicki, host of New Mexico Living. This episode of New Mexico News Insiders is sponsored by New Mexico PBS. If you enjoy New Mexico News Insiders, check out New Mexico in Focus, a great source for insights about what's happening in our state. Catch their podcast and videos at nmpbs.org or stream it anytime, anywhere on the free PBS app. Now, let's continue to New Mexico News Insiders.
We couldn't have this conversation with at least as well acknowledging one of the really large industries here, the film industry. That has been a place where we've seen companies like Netflix and Universal have both invested in properties here, along with many other productions have happened here in New Mexico. But we also have seen somewhat of an industry-wide contraction over in filmmaking over the last year. I believe it was a film office report from New Mexico that came out earlier this year that showed about half as much money was spent on productions over the last fiscal year compared to the prior 2 fiscal years. But we also understand that was an industry-wide, again, contraction. It wasn't just a New Mexico thing. There is always some speculation because New Mexico has very beneficial tax credits for many of these companies. There's always some speculation that perhaps it's not sustainable. Once you pull back the tax credits, do the companies leave? So my question to you was, how do you position New Mexico to continue to be a draw for the film industry aside from those tax credits?
That's a great question. And I think it's investing, one, in the workforce and the quality of life that filmmakers, that artists, that of where to film, making it easy to film. Year over year, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and now Las Cruces, by film industry magazines, has been rated the best places to film in the country. So that's part of it. We make it easy to film. It's a lot harder to get to go film and permit, and everybody's cranky at you in LA. Here, it's like it's really, people are very excited about it, and people want to be involved in the industry. So I think that's one part. We create a space that it's easy to work in, and we've built out some of the best crews in the world. So that's been a very intentional investment over time, from CNM to other workforce development programs, New Mexico State, others, and UNM to build out that workforce. We've had great partners with our union partners to do that as well. And we're now building out the Media Arts Collective, the MAC, at the rail yards here and then at the Arrowhead Center in Las Cruces to continue that workforce programs. And those are really looking at Georgia as a great example of how they built it. So I think building the workforce that you need, and then the physical infrastructure. So that was why we created the film partnership programs, so that we would get the physical capital investments from people like Netflix, from NBC Universal, to build out those sort of physical infrastructure. This is one of those places, one of the few places that New Mexico made a bet. Like we're gonna own film, and we're gonna build infrastructure. We're gonna create a workforce, and we're gonna create incentives to make us attractive. And it's been successful. Now, whether or not you think it was the right bet, people can have discussions around that. But we made it, and we've built that industry, and we are seen as one of the best in the world to do that work in.
Yeah. It's always exciting to see parts of New Mexico in big films too. The most recent one being Eddington. I was recently in TRC, just sort of polling the locals of like, what was it like? And some ladies at a restaurant were telling me, them filming here was the most exciting thing to happen all year. They would just come and watch the crews and, wave at Joaquin Phoenix as he was on.
I mean, who wouldn't want to do that, right? I mean, but I think you're right though. It creates pride in New Mexico to see ourselves reflected on the screen. It tells stories that are important to New Mexico. You can think about Oppenheimer and what that did. But it also, we believe that we're continuing to look at how do we continue to grow our film tourism, because that we have a lot of people who come here and want to just do the Breaking Bad tour, right?
That always is fascinating to me. There is a continued push for that, people who visit just to see.
So I lived in San Francisco for a while, and there were people come from other countries because they had seen the streets of San Francisco when they were kids, and they just wanted to go see those streets. We see this, I think we can see this same sort of thing here in New Mexico about, there's this image they've seen when, maybe living in Europe or living in wherever, whether it's from Breaking Bad or Oppenheimer or Roswell. And I'm interested in, or other shows out at Netflix, right? Stranger Things. So how do we use that to drive as another tool for our tourism side? I think those are opportunities that film is unique in that you can capture what happens just on your economic analysis, just with the spend for that production. But there's a bigger picture that really reshapes the narrative of your state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would you point to and celebrate as New Mexico's biggest success in terms of economic development?
Well, I think Intel is one that for long term has been a major success for New Mexico. I would say Meta is another one of those. But you can start to kind of even pull it down a little bit. I'll share one that was recent. We recently cut a ribbon up at the Picaris Pueblo for a new bicycle track, outdoor bicycle track. It's sick. I mean, people are doing flips. It is one of the most aggressive mountain biking tracks in the Western United States, if not the U.S. And right now it's free. So when we did that ribbon cutting, we had people from Kansas, Colorado, California, Arizona at the ribbon cutting, riding around on $10,000, $20,000 bikes, saying this place is amazing. And so what they can build from that investment in a rural community, I think it's those sort of things that maybe go under the radar a little bit, but are really important for the Pueblo, for the surrounding community, and creating that sort of those opportunities. We just opened a wave park on the Animas River in Farmington. So you can actually surf on the river in Farmington. And right away, guy opens a surfboard shop in Farmington. I mean, so again, but it's also going to create, it's that narrative. It's almost like the film thing. It's like it's a place where you take pride in place, and pride in your community. Us making investments, whether it's on Main Street program, whether it's our outdoor recreation programs, making investments in those communities helps create that pride that I think families and young people feel like, oh, wow, they're investing in me. They're building a bike park for me. It's not for the old guys, right? And that kid now feels differently about themselves. And I think that's part of the really fun part of what we get to do in economic development is, again, making those investments in families and kids.
Yeah. In your mind, where does New Mexico need to go next? What do we need to work on in terms of attracting more economic development?
So, great question. I'm super excited about some of the successes we had this last legislative session. In particular, our site readiness program, SB 169, our utility pre-deployment program, our trade ports bill, all of those, what that's going to do is it helps us create product we can sell. So for years, people would come to New Mexico and say, hey, we want to set up our business, but we need 50 acres, we need this kind of electricity, wastewater to do this advanced manufacturing. And the answer was, great, we'd love to have you. It's going to take us 3 to 5 years because we don't have a site that's got those things.
Right. You got to figure out where.
Yeah, and the guy says, well, I've got 9 months, so I'm going to Arizona or I'm going to Utah or Texas. So we were able to pass legislation this last year that's going to allow us to get sites ready for development. And we're partnering with cities, counties, tribal governments, and private sector to do this. We got $28 million in the site readiness bill to help deploy, and that can do environmental reviews, that can do traffic studies, that can do broadband, sewer, water, electricity in advance of a customer being identified. So when we identify that customer, we're ready to go.
You've built out the infrastructure.
Absolutely. We've already got over 50 sites identified, half of them already characterized. And that means we've looked at them, we understand what they need for next level development opportunities so that we're able to then start to deploy those funds to help them be site ready. And we believe that our policymakers, legislators who have capital outlay, now we've given them the best way to say, here's where you can put your capital outlay to have the biggest impact on the economic development in your community.
Wow. Yeah, it's doing that work while there's some downtime to ensure that when somebody does randomly come along, you're ready.
One of the things, I talked about the bike park because that's super fun and it was like really rewarding quick. Most economic development takes a long time. And it's about building the infrastructure. It's about building the community support, the design, figuring out what's the right fit for this community or this county, and then going out and really trying to actively recruit that in. That takes years. I mean, we have projects that I'm working on still that my predecessor was working on a year ago. So some of these have been in the queue and just working for a very long time. And most times when we're going to make an announcement, it's 6-8 months to a year that we've been working on it behind the scenes before we get to a place where it's public.
Yeah.
Well, everyone's excited for the In-N-Out burger to eventually, that announcement was made years in advance.
It's true.
Is there a typo in this news release? Really? 2027? Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else that we didn't ask you about that you'd like to add? I feel like is important for people to know or understand.
I think the things that I guess I would think that are important for people to know and understand is New Mexico is at a place that, and I know there's a level of frustration that we have not been. We've been on the wrong side of the 1 to 50 list for states, right? On a lot of different fronts. We're in a position to really change that narrative. And what I think people don't appreciate is where we've already shifted that narrative. And we talked a little bit about it, but again, we're number one in PhDs per capita. We're number one in per capita R&D public spend in the country by far. We're number two oil producing state in the country. Number five, natural gas producing state in the country. Number three for solar. You just start going through that list, and we are in a unique space to really drive investments and drive opportunity for the next generation. But we have to stay the course. The legislature, the governor have shown incredible leadership to get serious investments into this space. We got almost $190 million, almost $200 million of new money this legislative session. That is a significant, unprecedented investment by the legislature in economic development. If we can continue that type of investment over the next couple of years, and I think stay the course as to where we're competitive, advanced energy, advanced computing, space, defense. Those are also things that this federal administration are investing in, not removing money from. So if we lean into those spaces where we're uniquely competitive because of the labs, because of our history, because of our workforce, we do matching investments from the state, I believe in the next 2 years, we will be a very different state in New Mexico.
Secretary Black, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Special thanks again to Economic Development Director Secretary Rob Black, working for the state of New Mexico to cut big deals and across a lot of different industries. I think one of the things I would find the hardest about that job is knowing so much about so many very different industries.
Yeah, when you talk about having irons in the fire, there are a lot of irons in the fire when it comes to economic development in New Mexico. We could probably do full episodes about just one of the topics that we touched on. But if you all have any story ideas or people you'd like to hear from on our show, always feel free and reach out. I'm Gabrielle.Burkhart@krqe.com via email and GBurkNM on social media.
Indeed, and I am Chris.McKee@krqe.com, also at Chris McKee TV. Thanks for watching and listening.